Thank you. I want to start off with a story. A couple had just gone to bed when they heard a strange noise coming from downstairs. "Do you hear that?" the husband asked. "Yes," said his wife, with a bit of fear in her voice. So they both got up and went to see what's up. Sure enough, they caught a burglar in the act of stealing their silver. "This means," the man said, "I have to kill you." So he draws a gun and aims it at the wife. But just before pulling the trigger, he pauses and asks her in a demanding voice, "What's your name?" Now trembling, she answers meekly, "Elizabeth." "Elizabeth?" the man says with unexpected respect in his voice. "That's my mother's name. I can't shoot you." So he aims the gun at the husband and asks, "What's your name?" The husband answers, "My name is Jack, but everybody calls me Elizabeth." A good laugh warms the heart. But from that little story, we see that the way we look at things makes all the difference. A popular lecturer named Wayne Dyer says that when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. And I want to invite you to do just that tonight. I want us to have what I suppose they will call a paradigm shift. A different way of looking at and exploring the sacraments. And this is how I hope to set up this talk tonight, and I will follow on next week. Sacrament. I think we have to start to look at sacraments differently, the way we see it, understand it, and live it. I think that many of us Catholics have traditionally, somehow, somewhere along the line, grown up understanding sacraments as things. We get them, don't we? Just look at the language we use, and you will see what I'm getting at. Very often, Father Mike will bear me out here, people present themselves either the parish office or to the priest and say, "Father, I come for baptize the child. I come to get the thing." And they really, when you look at how they treat it, you see that they really just want somehow the priest to do a thing, put the thing on the child, and they're happy, they're gone the way. You're not going to see them back. Father said Christmas. We had a priest back in Guyana, an old priest, he's now dead. But he had two phrases. He used to say, C and E Catholics. Christmas and Easter. It's not really Easter, it's Good Friday. But then he had another descriptive one, which I liked quite. He says, hatched, matched, and dispatched Catholics. We see them when they're hatched, we baptize them. We see them when they're matched, we marry them. And of course, we dispatch them when they die. How do we understand sacrament? I want to invite us tonight to look at sacrament again in a different way, and to try to explore sacraments not simply as things that we get, but rather as relationship. Relationship. And to do this, or to help me, I want to go back to the Word of God. That's the source of everything, huh? God's Word to us. And if we go back to Old Testament times, there is a story in Exodus about the great hero of the Old Testament times. Who is that? Moses. Moses. He's the great hero of the Old Testament. And the story centers around that time. You know the story of Moses well, so I'm not going to tell you that now. But the story centers around that time after Moses had been sent away from the court. You know why? And he went and settled where? At a place called... Well, you have homework. You got to go and find out. I will not tell you. And he married and started a family. And then he used to work. Yes, Moses worked. And he used to look after animals. Well, I don't know what kind of animals. I wasn't there. But he looked after animals. And they were the type that needed grass, right? So he had to find pasture for them. And the story I want to get to is that story that happens that day when Moses goes out with his animals to find grazing grounds. And as he comes to a spot, maybe he had selected it beforehand, he noticed something. What did he notice? There was fire, right? Now, anybody who looks after animals will know that is a big no-no, right? When you got fire, it's for two reasons. One, you got to get the animals away from the fire. But also, it is destroying the food for your animals. Right? Now, at that time, in that place, bushfires were quite popular. Right? Quite popular. Place gets dry. You know, we have bushfires happening right now in California, really bad. And so it was quite popular around that place. So when Moses saw the fire that morning, or which it was probably a morning, he said, oh gosh, not another one. And even as he's turning to try and get the animals away, something catches his eye. Right? This one looked different. What was different? They had fire, but the bush wasn't burning. This one different, strange. And Moses and we had one, something in common. We fast. I could never work that one out, but we fast. We see fire and we go in for see. We hear gun shoot and we go in for... You should be running away from. So Moses said, this one looks strange, I got to... So he starts to move closer to the fire. And as he comes there, he hears that voice that tells him, take off your shoes. The ground on which you stand is holy ground. Now, you know the story. But this becomes a very defining moment in the life of Moses. As you see and explore that story, Moses at this moment will truly have an encounter with the living God that will change his life forever. Change his life forever. He will never be the same. This moment defines Moses for the rest of his life. It is this moment that begins a fantastic relationship with God. That was really something else. Moses will be the one who will stand up in the beginning and say, God, you can't do that. That was the kind of relationship he had. And this is the moment that starts it. This encounter with the living God. Now that is sacrament. That's sacrament. A sacrament is an encounter with the living God that invites us into relationship that changes us. We are not the same again. Relationship. So, I have to ask you, have you had any encounters with God? You know, we're kind of holding back there a little bit. I could almost sense it and feel it. Encounter with God. Because very often we are thinking of the big and extraordinary. You know, when we speak of encounter with God, you get a tap on the back, and when you look around, it's God speaking to you. Well, I'm not telling you that can't happen. God is God. And if he wants to encounter you that way, he will. But if you look at our tradition, you will see that very often how God encounters us, and that's why I told you that story, is through the ordinary, simple sometimes, and very mundane experiences of our lives. Moses went out that morning. He saw what looked like a very ordinary experience, a bushfire. And it is that ordinary thing that God will use to bring Moses into an encounter with him that begins a relationship that changes his life. So yes, we are having encounters with God, all of us, all the time. All the time. Some people sit in a church, for example, with a beautiful stained glass window, and in a moment of prayer, just feels as if they're lifted out of themselves. Others might sit, if you were in Guyana, on the seawall. You know, Guyana, famous seawall. Y'all is really knock us with it, but it's a beautiful spot. And some people can sit on that seawall at the rising of the sun or its setting, and in a moment just feel and experience God's presence in a powerful way. For others, it might be at the kitchen sink washing wares, while others might experience it in a moment of just listening to music. And I'm not saying necessarily what kind of music. It don't necessarily have to be religious music. I always share with people, every time I listen or hear Bob Marley's Redemption song, something happens for me. I just find it a very extraordinary piece of music. So we are having encounters with God in different ways at different times in our life. Yes. Now, in the church, we speak of the 7 sacraments. And for us in the church, these are moments when we are invited into an encounter with the living God that invites us into relationship with him and is meant to change us. We have the sacraments of initiation, baptism, confirmation, Eucharist, through which we are invited into that relationship with God and with the church. Initiated into, brought into. We have the sacraments of healing. You know them? Confession or penance, or the sacrament of reconciliation, sometimes we call it, and anointing of the sick. Through these sacraments, we are invited to an encounter with the living God that brings about healing in our lives. Listen to the words of our Holy Father Francis the Pope in his exhortation when he says the confessional is not a torture chamber, but it's a moment when we truly are invited into that embrace with our God. A moment of encounter through which we truly experience God's healing power. And then we have the last two. The sacraments of vocation. Orders and matrimony. I remember I had once a reader who got up and said, let us pray for more vacations. I have no problem with that, you know. But the word is vocation, and it comes from the Latin word voco, to call. Sometimes you would hear people say, you got a calling. Eh? In popular language, you got a calling. And what is your calling? It's that deep thing within you to live a particular way of life. A calling. And so some are called to ministry in the church. Like Father Mike and myself as priests, we receive holy orders, or deacons, married deacons, they receive orders. So some are called to that way of life, and others are called to a vocation of marriage. So, you okay so far? I ain't putting you to sleep yet. Okay, so now that we kind of looked a little bit at that sacrament and what a sacrament, and I ain't going into depth there, you know, but I hope that I can start to tickle your brain a little bit to start to explore sacrament differently. I ain't coming for the thing, but I'm being invited into an encounter with the living God that brings me into relationship with God and the church. So how then can we speak of marriage as a sacrament? And this is where you're going to see it very powerfully, just like holy orders. That is not a thing. I know many married couples who, when they are asked, how is marriage a sacrament? They say, well, we understood that you had to come to the church and the priest had to do his thing and he bless you. Very often they speak of it as blessing. We bless you and then your marriage is blessed. You hear that being reflected in the language we use when many married couples say, look, Father Mike, who marry us? Up to the last time I checked, he ain't married yet. Eh? So, I always tell people, I married a single but not available. All right. So, it's wrong language because the priests don't marry anybody. The priests, like the other two who are there, are witnesses to that marriage. They don't marry. It's the couple who are marrying each other. And we try to bring that out today in the celebration of the sacrament when we ask the couple to face each other. Don't face the priest. Face each other. You look at each other in each other's eyes and say to each other what you are promising. Because you are marrying each other. Now this, we have to understand, because very different. It's not Father putting something on me, giving me something. No, but the couple is being invited to an encounter with the living God in their relationship of love. And that's where they are being invited to become the place where God is encountered. They are being invited to become the sacrament of matrimony. It is in their relationship of love that God will be encountered. Now this is important. It's important for us to understand because it has repercussions. In other words, when two people decide to marry, they have a responsibility to us. It's not their private affair. I'm sorry to tell you. You know, we like to think this we business got nothing to do with y'all. No, no, no. because you have decided to become a sacrament for us, for each other and for us. You have a responsibility to us. If your relationship is not good, then we're not going to encounter the God there. You have a responsibility to us. You have a responsibility because you have made a decision to live a lifestyle. That's what it means to have a vocation. Marriage is not just simply, it is a vocation, a calling. You are committing yourselves to a way of life through which we will encounter the living presence of God. It's the same thing with us, huh? That's why the two sacraments are sacraments of vocation. When we become priests, we have to live a way of life through which God's people will encounter him in our lives. It's a commitment to a way of life. A way of life. And you don't think this far-fetched, you know. Sit down and think about it in your own experience and you're going to understand what I'm getting at. How many times, for example, we have known married couples, when we come into their presence, we feel something. Sometimes you can't articulate it, what it is, but you feel something. You go away and you suddenly say, I felt something special when I was with them. It is God's presence you are encountering in their relationship. Now, I'm not saying that they're perfect. I'm not talking about being perfect. I'm not saying couples will not have arguments and so on. No. But even there, in their forgiveness of one another, in their readiness to live in compassion and with tenderness and with love, they become that sacrament for themselves, for their family, and for us in the community of the church. So they are invited to become the sacrament of marriage. Now, this is one of the most powerful and beautiful things. And you see, marriage is being knocked about today, and it's sad. It's sad. It is one of the most powerful and beautiful sacraments in our church. And when we truly come to terms with that, we're going to start to live a different lifestyle in marriage that will truly become powerful in changing the world. I do believe that. But we got to start to change our thinking and understanding. In part of the work that I do at the tribunal, I know the other side of it. And I will be talking more about that next week. But I know the other side, the horror stories, I call them. Right? Horror stories. That we don't understand. People are getting married for all the wrong reasons. And we encourage it and we continue to condone it. Parents, families, priests, we all condoning it. They're marrying for the wrong reasons. We have to start to understand again the call to a lifestyle that has the great potential of changing the world. Marriage. And a commitment to that lifestyle. You're going to sleep now. So, the sacrament of matrimony as a way of life that when lived fully has such surprising characteristics that it will both challenge and bring out the best of those who enter it. In my own journey of exploration of this sacrament, I began to see it as such a pearl of great price. It is a vocation. A call from God, if you will, that can best be seen as a gift. I honestly believe that many couples who do not regard marriage as a sacrament may come to look at sacramental couples, in other words, couples who are living that sacrament, as models of how they would like to live out their commitment of married love. It is a way of life that demands the best of who they are as human beings and as followers of Jesus, rather than a simple legal living arrangement with public approval that demands nothing. And that's where we are moving towards. As we seek to, in the laws of our lands, to rewrite what marriage is, we are moving down that road of simply making legal contracts that don't speak to anything really. No responsibility for, but rather simply an individualistic understanding that this satisfies me. Marriage, as taught by us in the Catholic Church, is sacrament. It's sacrament. It is a way of life. It is a vocation. And to that we call and invite. And that's why if you search the scriptures, you will see Paul, for example, saying, not everybody can do it. I always say that, why all of us think everybody should get married. Some people are just not marriageable. And I don't mean that bad. Why we think it is a vocation, we are called to it. We're called to it. I used to always like to think that I would have been an excellent husband. But I don't think so now, because I know that God has called me to a different life and vocation. Right? If he wanted to call me to that life, he would have called me there, but he didn't. And so why should I think that I could be the perfect husband? I don't know. All of us, we are thinking, everybody just simply thinks we must get married. Many cases I'm doing before the courts in the tribunal right now, that's what they will tell you. Well, the next thing to do is to get married. Why? You see, we are not understanding that it is a call to live a vocation. We are keeping marriage and making marriage at the level of just simply emotions. Emotions. Today's reading, tell me if my time up. Today's reading from Paul. Paul writing in his letters to the Corinthians, that powerful, powerful exhortation and love. You're not going to find it anywhere else in the world, Powerful is the best. And Paul, if you examine it, that's what Paul is saying. It is a decision. It's not just simply based on whims and fancies and emotions. No. And that's what is happening. One moment we in love, we on the top end of the roller coaster, and next moment we out. And when you feel you're down there and you're feeling out of love, what do you do? You're gone. You pack the bag and gone. No. I make a decision based on that call of God to live a lifestyle that he has called me to. It's a decision. Love is a decision. Love can't be just simply emotions that go like that. It's a decision I make. And so that call of God to live the vocation of marriage is important. is important. I think one of the problems we are faced with is that we are not preparing people adequately for it. And I don't mean the course they send you on before you get married. No. Preparation that starts in the family. I call it the family for me, and marriage and the family for me is the school of love. Huh? You don't agree? That's the school of love. That's where you're taught from the very earliest moments of your existence. You're taught the way of love. Sadly, many of our families not doing that. It's sad because the reality that we are living in today is that the place that is meant to be the cradle and the sanctuary that teaches us the way of love has become, in some instances, the horror house, the place of abuse, where children are not safe. So back to the family. It's in that place, right? And that's why, to understand where your vocation is as a married couple, where the children are brought up and taught and formed and educated, a very important aspect of marriage. Not just simply to bring forth the children, but to educate them, the code speaks of. That commitment to form and educate your children, that's where I'm talking about. That's where they must be formed to eventually hear the call, not just to priesthood, but also to marriage. Or not just to marriage, but also to priesthood. And so it's there that we must prepare them. But, again, what is happening in our families? There's plenty of talk about love, as I keep saying. Everybody talking about love these days. Everybody writing about love. Everybody singing about love. Everybody making films about love. But we're not on the same page. So get it straight. We're not on the same page. There's some who will tell us, for example, every now and then, cuff them down. Black up the eye, bruise up the knee, and then they love you eternally. I don't laugh at it again. I don't laugh at it again. That is what we call domestic violence, if you didn't know. And all it does is leave people battered, crying. It does no good. But there's a clear philosophy of love that people today commit themselves to doing. That they say, I love you and I beat up on you. It's a way of life. But that is not the way that Jesus calls us to and invites us to. It's not the way. When he said to us, love as I have loved you, he didn't tell us to love and beat up on people. He didn't tell us to love and show disrespect. No. So how will we teach our young ones and form them and prepare them for the sacrament of marriage? It's a big question. And a challenging one for us. A very challenging one for us. How much more time I have? 5 minutes more. Any questions? No? I stun you enough?
Father, I've heard it said, I don't know if it's true, that the priest administers 6 sacraments, and the 7th, the one in marriage, is the people, the two parties administer sacrament to each other. Would that be technically correct?
Yes. So that's why I pointed out the language we use is wrong, and we should correct ourselves. The priests don't marry a couple. The priest is an official witness of the church at the marriage of a couple. Right? The couple the two persons, and should I say it very clearly? A man and a woman standing before God and before the church, whose witness is the priest, and two other witnesses of the community. The man and the woman are the ones who are marrying each other. They pronounce vows to each other. They promise to live a particular way of life as they commit themselves to what is called covenant relationship. And I just want to spend the last few minutes I have on that. Covenant relationship is what we call marriage. And it's very different from contractual relationship. In a contractual relationship, which we all know about, two parties or more agree to certain things and they make an agreement and sign off on it. And they would be rather stupid if they don't have some clause in that agreement, either side, to get themselves out of the agreement. They usually would. So if the contractor does not do what is required, as the contract says, then the person who is entering into that contract with the contractor can break it. If the employer, the one who is entering into the contract with the contractor, does not follow what is said in the contract about payment to the contractor on time and so on, the contractor can down tools and walk away. Right? In other words, in a contractual agreement, there are clauses there to end the relationship. When we speak of marriage, it is not that kind of relationship. It is what we call covenant. And that's a very biblical concept. Covenant spoke to that kind of relationship that bound people that was unbroken. You couldn't break off. Couldn't break it off. Covenant speaks of the relationship, for example, between God and his people. And we have different examples of that in the scriptures. God entering into covenant relationship with his people through Abraham, Moses, right? We have examples of that. Covenant relationship where God says, I will be your God and you will be my people. And that in breaking. In fact, there was one of the covenant relationships that was signed in those days. They had a way of doing it where they would take an animal and cut it in half, lay it on the ground, and the two persons entering the contract would walk through the two halves. And it was meant to express that they were serious about this covenant, so that if I break it, cut me in half as the animal is cut in half. And when God was entering into covenant with his people and this was done, he stopped, who was it? Abraham, from walking through. He said, no, you don't walk through. I will walk through because I will always be faithful. God knew that we tend to be unfaithful, but he will always be faithful. The covenant relationship that we speak of in marriage is that of the relationship. It mirrors the relationship between God and his people. Powerful, the language that is used always to describe that relationship between God and his people is marriage. The prophet Hosea. Many, many examples of it. Marriage. In the New Testament, that is taken up, and it's the relationship between Christ and the church, his people. As Paul writes in his letters about that being, the marriage reflects that, is meant to reflect that relationship. Covenant relationship that binds us for life. Right? For life. I'm going to end where I will take it up next week. And that's why we say in the Catholic Church, if you divorce, you can't remarry in the church. A big issue in our church. Why? Because divorce is a legal instrument that the state uses to end a marriage. Yes? The Catholic Church does not accept any instrument, legal or elsewhere, that will end a covenant relationship until death do us part. I leave that with you to think about. I will show you next week what is open to those whose marriages have failed in the church. And we're going to try to explore a little bit of that next week. There's still hope there, but you will see it is not divorce. When we speak in the church of a declaration of nullity, it's not divorce. It's not divorce. We're going to try to explore what that means next week. All right?
Have a beautiful week, everyone. Don't forget, let us love one another. God bless you all, and thank you, Father.